Yo, what's good with you? Back in black with another Xdefiant video, and unfortunately, it is not a good one. Have you guys noticed the consolidation of many companies, video games, money even? Unfortunately, this is one of those things that applies to Xdefiant as well, as they have just today earlier decided that they will no longer be supporting this game, and essentially you can go ahead and delete it because there is no longer a reason to have this game on your console or PC. Basically, it is being cancelled. If you don't believe me, take it from the main man himself, Mr. Mark Rubin, the founder of Xdefiant. He says, I am unfortunately here today to announce that Xdefiant will be shutting down. Starting today, new downloads and player registrations will no longer be available. We will still release our Season 3 content in the near future. Exact date to be determined. That's kind of crazy. And the servers will be, remain online until June 3rd, 2025, which is not too far away. For those who have purchased the Ultimate Founders Pack, you will receive a full refund, and players who have made any purchases within the last 30 days will also be refunded. Those refunds should happen automatically within the first 8 weeks of today, and you can find more details on our official website. There's a lot more to his post, I'm not even going to lie, but it gets to a point where he starts monologuing, and I don't necessarily want to, sit up here and read this whole thing to you guys, and I would consider it boring, but I kind of do want to get into why I feel this is a very sad day for first-person shooter games in general. And it kind of starts with the simple fact that whenever there is a competitor to the main big bad evil that is Call of Duty, which is the main game that I think Xdefiant was taking a stab at, they don't even give them a proper chance to fully develop and become a fully fledged game, for lack of better words. And I don't even know whose fault that is at the end of the day, because really, I guess if you think about it and sit down, they could have just took their time when it came to developing the game and could have made sure there was more maps and more content, generally speaking, which I think was one of the main downfalls when it comes to Xdefiant, is that they just couldn't maintain the interest of the general player base. I mean, yeah, Mark Rubin, he was definitely fighting the good fight when he came out and said hey, we're just going to attack this thing with no skill-based matchmaking, which I applaud that, more so than any shooting game that has come out in the last 3 years, because who else has come out and said hey, we understand that you guys old school shooter fans generally hate skill-based matchmaking and would prefer an arcade shooter experience that doesn't have that? No one except for Mr. Mark. So I mean, kudos to him, and it really does suck that he's gonna lose his company. Basically, I'm sure he will get another job somewhere else, but it just seems like it was a valiant effort that was for naught, just due to the simple fact that they didn't give it enough time to bake in the oven. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to it. I think another one of the main issues when it comes to Xdefiant is the net code, because it was a very, very extensive stint where the netcode was pretty much horrible, on par with how Black Ops 6 is performing literally nowadays. And thank God I don't play that game, so I don't necessarily have to deal with it on a consistent basis. But Xdefiant was more or less in the same boat, because they still had the ghost bullets and the lag comp dying around corners and stuff like that, just like the old school Call of Duties did back in the day. But I don't think that's something that most players are willing to put up with. If you can't, invest in good servers for your game, it's probably just a game that shouldn't be released. And you can see how Call of Duty is suffering from that. If they didn't have so much goodwill built up over the last 20-ish years, I'm sure they would be in a similar situation as Xdefiant, if we're being frank with you. And another thing, this might just be a little more personal on my side, but something that I really kind of didn't get over with Xdefiant is the fact that it doesn't really have that same gritty Call of Duty feel like the old school Call of Duties had. It's not a military setting, obviously, because it's based on a bunch of UBISOFT IP like Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six and etc., the Division and whatnot, which I mean, it's cool because you can, obviously have a lot more creativity and variety with the I don't want to call them like specialist abilities. I guess the powers, like the medic and whatnot, and flamethrower dudes and whatnot. I mean, it's cool, but like, I think I'm speaking for a good majority of old school shooter fans when I say they were looking for something a little more militaristic themed when it comes to competing with Call of Duty. I understand that the general landscape nowadays is where, you know, you want to be a little more cartoony so you can appeal to all the kids and the Gen Z and Gen X and all that jazz, but like, I don't know. It's a first person game and you can't even see your skins more often than not. So at the end of the day, is that really something that matters, or is it more so that you want to nail the gunplay and the maps and the general feel of the game along with the mechanics, which I'm not going to say Xdefiant had bad mechanics. I think the mechanics in the game were actually really good. It's just, again, this is just a personal thing. I think they would have did a lot better if they created a game that had a more realistic approach. Maybe they should have did a reboot with Medal of Honor, but that is another subject for another video. Something else I did want to mention, and I don't know how much this directly contributed to the downfall of Xdefiant, but I don't know if free-to-play is necessarily like the way to go when it comes to creating a new first-person shooter, especially in the arcade realm when it, you know, comes to things like that. I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, because on one hand you do want the game to be as accessible to as many people as possible. So yes, I could see how making it free to play and, you know, giving everybody a chance to try the game out would be a good idea, generally speaking. But on the flip side of that, or where the sword actually cuts you, is the fact that the team was so small, they just couldn't get out content on a, I guess the word generally I want to use is a consistent basis. And when you have a free-to-play game that relies on a constant influx of new content to keep the people interested in playing on a consistent basis, I guess we're in a day and age where you can't necessarily rely on like mechanics and gameplay just to keep people playing, unless you're Call of Duty and that's how, you know, you got your bread and butter, generally speaking. But if you're not going to be as, you know, fleshed out as Call of Duty is when it comes to mechanics and how the game feels, then you definitely got to beat them at something. And I guess in this case, Xdefiant's case, it would have had to been content, or maybe they just can't, because like I said, the team is small. I mean, Fortnite on the other hand seems to have no problem pumping out content on a consistent basis, which is how they've seemed to supersede Call of Duty in a sense. And it's just at a point where like there's so many populated free-to-play games that it's just hard to really break into that realm unless you're going to exceed in one of those areas. And like I said, Xdefiant does not exceed in feel or mechanics, and they're not exceeding in content like Fortnite is. And then it's like they want to pump it with microtransactions all the time. And it, you know, it brings me back to my point that I said earlier. It's a first-person shooter. So a lot of these cosmetics that you're relying on people to consistently buy is not even something that is consistently being like observed like it would be in a third-person shooter. So it's just kind of like an Achilles heel, and it kind of makes me wonder if free-to-play was even the right way to go when it comes to a game like this, or any game in the future when it comes to that, for that matter. Or I guess if you are going to do it, it's got to have such a large amount of money behind it that it's unfathomable that you would even be able to compete with Fortnite or Call of Duty, especially if you're, you know, dealing with Ubisoft, which we know they're pretty horrible nowadays when it comes to managing new IP. IDK, man, I think like if Ubisoft didn't have like failure after failure after failure, and then if they didn't make their existing franchises that were actually good continually worse over time, perhaps they could have a, you know, a lot more investment money that they could have put behind Xdefiant, which would have put it in a better spot, generally speaking, from the beginning, or even now to begin with. But I guess I don't want to make this video sound entirely negative. Xdefiant definitely did excel in some areas, and I just wanted to give them some credit for that. The first area that they were definitely really good at was customer feedback, especially online, like on Twitter and whatnot. Them and Delta Force have probably been the only online Twitter profiles I've seen that have constantly been addressing player feedback, whether it be negative or positive, in a formal and like, respectable manner, and they're always constantly, putting out updates on when you can expect the nearest patches or fixes or content updates and whatnot. Not that they were very plentiful or plentiful enough, but nevertheless their communication was top notch, and I wish some quote unquote other top-notch companies, i.e. Call of Duty, would take some notes, and maybe we would be in a better space as a gaming community, generally speaking. And again, I just want to applaud them for taking that route, as trying to make a shooting game with no skill-based matchmaking, whereas every other shooting game I know of says that it's a good thing, or they just don't talk about it at all, or they don't even mention it. And we all know it's there, and it's annoying, and I just kind of hate that people don't generally get to relive the good days where shooter games just didn't have to deal with that kind of stuff. And yeah, I guess the last thing that I wanted to give Xdefiant credit for is just having the ability to take multiple IP and meld it into one game and actually make it functional and fun to play. I think, again, if they just had a lot more from the jump, this game actually probably could have had some wheels that lasted longer than it did. And it makes me sad that this is a game that is getting canceled, because I don't think they generally deserved it. It's not like it was completely broken on launch. I mean, the netcode was bad, but they fixed it to a point where it's bearable enough, and it just kind of sucks to see them gain momentum and then fizzle out of something that probably didn't even have anything to do with them for real. I mean, it is what it is. I don't know if like the new gen kids just actually love skill-based matchmaking, or if it's just moving with the crowd, like everybody started on Call of Duty and they just refuse to leave. I mean, personally, it's an addiction that I have broken, and I've been trying to find something to replace it with, and it's just annoying when you see that there can only be like 3 or 4 main games, and anybody that tries to like make something new or creative eventually ends up falling by the wayside, just because of the simple fact that people are not open to trying something new or giving it a fair shake. But that kind of brings me back to what I was saying earlier. Perhaps they should reach back into some old IP like Medal of Honor or like Brothers in Arms, and probably bring that back for nostalgia purposes, because I know that's what a lot of people like to rely on. But at this point, I feel like I'm kind of just rambling. Just to encapsulate everything I was saying, it sucks that Xdefiant is gone, because now every game that I play is going to have strong skill-based matchmaking, more than likely, until something new comes out. But it is what it is. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment sections. How are you feeling about the Xdefiant being canceled? Did you enjoy the game? Did you even play? Did you believe? Did they even have a chance to even sniff Call of Duty? Let me know down in the comment section. I appreciate you very much for watching, and I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Don't forget to aim for that like button, shoot that subscribe button. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Black Guy out.